Okay, so it's been a few weeks since HBO Max has touched down and delivered unto us our cherished cartoon collections. On launch day, I realized that despite the expansive, really rich group of old movies and DC stuff, the slate of original programming was a bit sparse. On day one, there were 6 to be exact. Half of them were reality show ideas, one's a documentary series that weirdly sticks out among all the fluffy content, and the other 2 are the family draws. The Not Too Late Show with Elmo, and of course, the creme de la creme, the new Looney Tunes Cartoons. As perhaps one of the most ambitious iterations of the franchise to date, the thing has been years in the making. Spearheaded by Pete Braungart, creator of the divisive CN originals Secret Mountain Fort Awesome and Uncle Grandpa, the shorts have brought many talented animators and crew aboard to craft the definitive modern Looney Tunes adaptation. 1,000 minutes of content has been created for it, but as of now, we've only gotten the first batch of cartoons packaged into 11-minute episodes. Today, we'll dive into the first 10 episodes of the 2020 Looney Tunes slate. The presentation of the shorts is great twofold. Visually, it does try to invoke that classic feel through production elements and the cartoons themselves. They tried really hard to replicate that classic design, and it sells itself pretty well. It's the little details that matter, the character slates at the beginning of the show are well crafted, and they seem to mimic the 1948 color rings the most. A couple of episodes in, they started using this title animation for the show, which is subtle, but it fits. The character design is also pretty interesting. In contrast to a lot of the animated reboots, the new shorts give these characters a lot more visual articulation, a lot more little details and fluffs and things like that. A lot of the director's flair comes out in the designs, but at times it feels like characters from one short would belong in separate media. It definitely takes cues from the good old days, but some characters arguably look more streamlined than others. For example, Daffy and Sylvester have 2 very distinct redesigns that are far departures from the last few outings. The more sleek, flowing design of the former brings out his eyes, and it emphasizes the face, which is important because in this incarnation, he puts the loony in Looney Tunes. His gaze tells me exactly what I need to know about him. Sylvester's interesting to look at and could communicate to be rather clunky, but other than that, I don't get much from him. I'm probably a bit biased, like his general redesign is my least favorite of them all.
The dry spell is over!
Speaking of which, gotta get into the characters. Now, the appeal of the Looney Tunes characters is that they are the main draw. No matter where they end up or what situation they end in, you can put on a good show with them by just having them be themselves. Their antics define character-driven cartoons, and in keeping with that defining tack, the characters have been placed in various situations and continuums for ages now. We've seen them everywhere and as anything, but in recent years there's been attempts to return them back to their original personalities. Bugs' motivations vacillate between being willfully spiteful and being cornered into some games, but he's still an energetic trickster god. Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam are both ambitiously good adversaries. They obviously don't have the trademark firearms, but personally, I think the scythe suits the former much better. Daffy, as we've established, is nuts, and Porky is a bit of a straight man. The 2 are paired up more often here, and needless to say, they work quite well together. Curse of the Monkey Bird is arguably the duo at their best, with a good trade-off between either guiding the action. Obviously, being mainly conflict-driven, there's a lot of common pairings that are made, and structurally the first batch was good at giving the major players their time. Even if I didn't care for an individual character, their work was still pretty good. I was pleased to see a Gossamer short thrown in too, even more so to find out that it was one of the best animated of this whole batch. The scoring was also pretty nice. It keeps a light and bouncy pace throughout, but the sound is still complex. It's not as stellar or heavy as, say, the score of Family Guy, but it works. One segment where it stood out was in Fleece and Desist, where it gets to flex a different type of sound for a very different type of cartoon. Alright, so there's obviously an attribute I have yet to zero in on. That's essential to these shorts. I have a lot to say in terms of how it was received, a small controversy included. I gotta go grab my notes for a minute. I've got pages and pages and stuff, but I think Mann wanted to give the Looney Tunes shorts some of his many thoughts, so I'm gonna give him the floor for a little bit, alright? Just hang tight for a minute.
You know, I honestly didn't see myself getting introduced by a dog twice in the same year, but that's 2020 for you. Anyway, as an avid lover of the Looney Tunes, I find these to be a great successor to their legacy. It stays true to the heart of the Looney Tunes while adding a small touch of modern affairs to it while not becoming dated. You get that great sense of pacing the old shorts were known for when it comes to the jokes. They have good build-up that lets jokes have a strong impact where it needs to.
Hey, 4.3, not bad. Coochie coochie coo.
Stop that.
No problem, Doc. Marvelous. Stupendous.
There's a clear love and care put into the series that you absolutely can feel. The crew was giving it their damnedest to make this feel not like a separate iteration, but more as a continuation of the original shorts with a natural evolution. It kinda has a feeling of a passing of the torch sort of quality to it, like someone from the new generation looked at the old generation and just said, "We got this, thank you for your service." And it just makes you feel good, honestly. It doesn't have any plot-based gimmicks like, what if the Looney Tunes were domesticated? What if they had redesigns? What if they sucked? It simply keeps the legacy of the originals intact in favor of reintroducing a new audience to them while still having that classic flair that the old audience would love. It's something that properly captures the spirit of what made the Looney Tunes great with no major sacrifices. The characters live up to a lot of the basic standards that were set back in the days. They even went as far as to technically reset Daffy back to when he was just a total goofball, and I honestly kind of miss that about him. I enjoy when he's just being a careless jerk, but I also like when he was just being so wacky and over the top. The rest of the cast keep that great appeal that they've had, and it just makes for a fun, great time that either new or old fans will enjoy. Now, I won't pretend that this iteration of Looney Tunes is 100% perfect. While it is a great continuation of the legacy, there are a few shorts that fall short. Some of the shorts, particularly the Porky and Daffy segments, can feel a bit just like filler. Like they're there, and some of them can get somewhat of a laugh, but it feels like it's craziness for the sake of craziness. I can't say I hate them, it's just a matter of they're not as funny as the other shorts that they have in this roster. Some just have jokes that don't really land that well, or just don't have as many laughs as you want them to have, but honestly, that's Looney Tunes. Not every short was perfectly genius as we want to believe it was. There were some that were kind of duds, and it's the same thing here. And I think that's perfectly okay. I wouldn't ask them to make a perfect Looney Tunes series where everything is great and all of it's a laugh. There's gonna be some duds, and I think that's perfectly fine here. The biggest thing though I do hope happens with this series is they bring in some of the newer characters they've had over the years, like Lola. That's Looney Tunes show Lola, not Space Jam Lola. We don't need to repeat that horrible atrocity.
Don't ever call me doll.
Oh, Lord.
Petunia could definitely have some moment in the spotlight, like give her some much needed time to shine as a character. We haven't really gotten to see a lot of her other than her appearance on the Looney Tunes show. And that was just so minor. She only had but 2 episodes, so give her something. And then there's also Tina, who honestly I feel is a very underutilized character. She was pretty hilarious, and of course she wouldn't be much of a counter to Daffy, at least now because he's more wacky, but I feel she could still work with her sarcastic tone. She could be that very snarky asshole cashier lady or something to just a jerk of a customer. That'd be a funny scenario. There's some possibilities with her. I still see she has strong potential to still be very funny like she was in the Looney Tunes show. I can only imagine what scenarios they can come up with for these characters though. That's the biggest thing about it. From this promotional image, it does seem like they will be a part of the roster, barring Tina, which I just say. Boo! So it's just a matter of seeing what they do with them. Ooh, I forgot to mention the animation. Well, Deli's coming back. He can tell you all about that part.
Alright, I'm back, and I come bearing mountains of notes. Let's talk about the animation. As you know, the animation seems to be pretty varied among this set of cartoons. Some have a more traditional look, others look digitally rigged, more have a look in between. As far as I know, there's 4 studios that had a hand in this batch. There may be more in the next few installments, but I'm betting these guys worked on most of the others as well. The animation studios involved are Yowza Animation, a Canadian studio perhaps best known for their work on a couple of the 21st century Disney shorts and Welcome to the Wayne. Tonic DNA, a Quebecois animation studio well known for their work on the DC Superhero Girl shorts and the 98 classic The Old Lady and the Pigeons. Snipple Animation, a Filipino studio renowned for their work on episodes of DuckTales and Wacky Races. And finally, Yiram, a Korean studio arguably defined by their work on the Seth MacFarlane cartoons and the past modern Looney Tunes iterations. All of them have a different look that is defined mainly by the techniques they use. There are smaller touches like coloring or movement that are way more variable considering the glut of directors on these too. Yowza seems to have the most work, and theirs is identifiable through the slower puppet-rigged work with a bit of bounce. Snipple's work also seems largely digital, but with a bit more pop and fluidity. Tonic DNA only got to work on one short, Big League Beast, but it's easily become a fan favorite for animation quality alone. It has a great sense of timing to it. Their work is smooth, but snappy when it needs to be. Yiram is very old school. They follow much in the way of the other Korean studios like Rough Draft and Wang, in that they can encapsulate a production's touch, but typically not in very radical ways. Their work is simplistic, but pretty consistent. They've been said to have been fired from the project due to their lack of fluidity in their work. Citation needed, though. Don't quote me on that. The quality presented can be a sticking point for many, Yowza being the most prominent presence of the 4. Took me a long while to get used to. I'm very much a Yiram kind of person, and probably would have expected them to be a more reasonable favorite, but if Tonic got more work, then that would make for a god-tier batch of cartoons. Snipple's a pretty good in-between for me, though. Whatever your preference ends up being, they all have their strengths and weaknesses on a technical level. Having said that, all of them are capable of delivering a good product. I only gave you a sample of some of the works I figured you'd recognize more, but you want to know a great cartoon that 3 out of 4 of the studios worked on that I didn't specify? Green Eggs and Ham. God-tier quality, hand-drawn project, Green Eggs and Ham. In Yiram's defense, the odd man out, they got to work on the modern Tom and Jerry movies, which in terms of art complexity and fluidity, it brings out in spades. Also, are we not gonna act like American Dad has been sporting some crazy animation the past few seasons? Like, come on. My point being in saying this, that these studios know their stuff. Not all the work is gonna appeal, but they house animators worth their salt. Based off of what I've seen from them, I'll have nobody tell me otherwise. I say this only because there's been a bit of opposition that piques my curiosity as to how these shorts are perceived by the other half.
Now, Porky here looks... this animation of Porky seems very stiff to me.
Whereas Daffy does not?
Well, it's not as bad. Like, Porky looks wrong here. Is Porky the wrong size? He looks like he's not... I don't know, he looks flat or something.
Something else I wanted to zero in on is the whole animation commentary debacle, in which an intrepid franchise historian and his guest being a self-proclaimed Chuck Jones animator, but in reality having had a much more prominent footprint on the early Nelvana library, won off on the digital animation of the shorts.
But they're doing this with software and cutouts to some extent, right? So they're trying to do the fewest number of cutouts, and maybe they can do some in-betweens electronically. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how they do this. Now, I don't do this kind of work. I've never done this kind of work.
As an animation student myself, I can't write this guy off completely. Like, as out of pocket as he was throughout the video itself, he did have some scant insight to share.
Look at the composition, how bad that is. He's got a thing sticking out of his head, right? It looks like that wet cement thing is plugged into his head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, you want to avoid that.
Yeah.
That's jarring. Visually, that's jarring.
Of course, none of that erases how he acted in the 2 commentaries he was a part of. It's funny because both the animator and the host were given plenty of shit, but for as defensive as the latter was after the fact, I don't think he was too much in the wrong. Like, sure, maybe he could have come into his own more as a goof wrangler, but he himself wasn't too critical. He very much walked the line in the commentary itself.
But watch this. Now, doesn't it look like software more than animation?
Yeah, but I feel I dismissed that at first because I'm so accustomed to seeing it.
At most, he just seemed unwilling to challenge his guest on his very apparent biases. I checked out a couple of the other short commentaries just with him, and he seems pretty receptive to the draftsmanship.
And as I say here, I normally do complain about the color, but with the exception of this grass, I gotta tell you, man, this is the one where the color looks the most cinematic.
I think all things considered, we got a great result from these shorts. There are some things we can work tirelessly on for ages and still not have them come out too well. So for all these folks to pour in the resources for years, to get a pretty decent result is a relieving prospect. These are, for all intents and purposes, modern Looney Tunes shorts. They are not the cartoons of old, but they are very much an imprint on some of modern animation's best and brightest.